Welcome everyone to Starting Your Business, Increase Your Chances of Success. This is Module 2 and my name is George McAllister. I am a Regional Center Director for the Small Business and Technology Development Center, also known as the SBTDC. In this module, we're going to go over the business plan. Throughout my discussion, I am going to be referring to the Business Startup and Resource Guide. This is a free online publication that you can download at your convenience from our website. Although I'm going to be covering the information in this guide today, you do not need a copy of it while I'm making the presentation. However, a lot of people find it helpful to have a guide present so they can take notes. So the choice is yours. Before we begin, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I'll be glad to answer them. Business plans. You would be surprised at the number of people who tell me, why do I need to write a business plan? It's right here in my head. Well, I doubt it, but at the same time, I'm not a mind reader and I don't know anybody else who is. So if you don't write down the business plan, then how is anybody going to know what you're planning to do? You have to write down the business plan. So if you have to write a business plan, what is it? A business plan is a document describing the goals, strategies, and resources of a business over a period of time. If you're going to write it down, what are some of the other reasons why you need to write your business plan? First of all, it helps you focus your ideas. You'll be using a business plan outline, and in that outline, it will show you everything you need to know as far as what needs to be written in your business plan. It creates a path for you to follow as your business grows. When you start your business, you're going to find that a lot of opportunities are going to come at you. And you need to make sure that the opportunities are ones that you can build upon and not opportunities that are going to distract you from what you're trying to do. Thirdly, it creates benchmarks against which you can measure progress. As your business grows and develops, you need to make sure you're on track. And if you get off track, you want to make sure that you can correct things before it gets out of hand. Very important. It provides a document for attracting financing. Obvious. How is a funding source going to know what your business plans are unless they're written down? Now, let's talk about some tips in writing plans. Having read hundreds of plans over the years, there are several things that I'd like to go over that I have found that are helpful in writing business plans. Keep it simple and focused. Do not write a book. No one has time to read it. Make it easy to read using understandable language. Here again, if there is a lot of terminology in your industry that the reader is not going to understand, make sure that you define that terminology. Also, watch out for acronyms. That too can be hard for the reader to understand. Be honest and objective. If you're not honest in your business plan, the only person you're hurting is yourself. Give you an example. I had a client a while back who was starting a restaurant. Well, he had worked with the architect, the builder, the equipment supplier, and determined it was going to take $800,000 to build that business into the look that he wanted, the nuance, whatever you want to call it. He had that vision in his head, but luckily he had someone like an architect write it out for him. Well, he then decided that he needed $200,000 in working capital. So he needed a total of $1 million in funding to get the business off the ground and running. I said, okay. So I said, can I ask you a couple of questions? And he said, go. I said, first question. I said, what are you serving? He said, lunches. 5 days a week from about 11:30 to 3, I'm going to be catering to the downtown workforce. How much is the average meal ticket? He said, around $10. That makes sense. That works. I said, how many chairs are you going to have in your restaurant? He said, 40. Then I asked him, what do you project your sales to be the first year? He said, $1.5 million. Well, if you do the math based on those numbers, you will find that in order to meet a $1.5 million revenue projection in the first year, people who come to that restaurant and get 15 minutes to eat and out, and it has to be totally full the entire time. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been in a restaurant where it's totally full from 11:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and people only eat for 15 minutes and get up and go away. So make sure that you're honest with yourself. It's objective. Look at your plan. Make sure that nothing like this exists because other people will find it. Do not force the numbers to make the financing work. Review the plan as an outsider. Review it in the eyes of the reader. How are they going to interpret what you're saying? And then along with that, have others help you in the process. It always helps if you get other people to read your plan. Different points of view are going to make it a lot clearer and more complete. Review and revise on a regular basis. A lot of times I'll go into a client and I'll say, can I see your business plan? And they go, sure. So they get up from their desk, walk over to their shelf, pull out the business plan, blow it off, and hand it to me. That's not the way to treat a business plan. You do not file it away once you've written it. You're supposed to look at it, review it, revise it, update it on a regular basis. It's your guide. Now, if these are the tips for writing a good business plan, let's talk about what you need to avoid. First, don't submit a rough draft. Make sure you've got all the spelling taken care of, the grammar issues. Make sure it looks like a quality piece of writing. Outdated financial projections. Again, do not want to submit projections that are outdated. And what I mean by that is, let's say it's October, and your financial projections start last July. That doesn't make sense. Make sure they're current. And the same thing if you're talking about your business. If you say, I'm going to have a grand opening in July and it's August, well, did you have it? So you've got to make sure everything is current. Unjustified assumptions. Again, you've got to make sure you justify everything you've written, all your opinions. You've got to have those justified somewhere. Not understanding the contents, especially the financials. Just a few weeks ago, I was in a meeting with a client and the loan officer, and we were discussing the business plan. And the loan officer noticed that the gross profit margin jumped 5% the second year. So he said, I'm curious, why did your gross profit margin jump? My client said, I have no idea. I had someone else write my business plan and I didn't review it. I really don't know how to read financials. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer your question, but I can get back to you. The loan officer said, no, that's okay. You can imagine where that conversation went. Boom. No funding there. It's okay to have someone write your business plan for you, but just make sure you understand what they're writing. You get together and you do it as a team effort. You need to understand that. Okay, let's start moving into the business plan. Yes?
I've read several sample business plans, and there's a lot of information in these plans. What have you found is the best way to write a business plan?
Good question. There is a ton in the business plan. I would look at it this way. The business plan consists of two major parts. You have the text, and then you have the numerical portion of your plan. The text, description. The numerical is a description of your business in a numerical format using financial statements. Both portions need to support each other. You do not want to say in the text portion that your first year sales are going to be $1.5 million, and then in the financial projections it shows first year sales of being $1.7 million. Doesn't work. Now, with that being said, what most people do is instead of doing a linear process, starting in an outline mode, doing this step, next, they work on all parts at the same time. And you want to work on all parts at the same time because you're going to need to draw from different parts of the business plan and the financials in order to build it. So look at it as a matrix, and you're going to build it all at one time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. Okay, let's start talking about the business plan. The executive summary, the first part. It's typically just one page. No sense to write a lot there. You're explaining why you're writing the plan. What's the purpose of writing this plan? Can be used as a separate document. This is especially true if you're looking for funding. Instead of sending the entire business plan to the funding source, send them the executive summary to see if they're interested. If they're interested, then send the entire plan. Write it last. It is very difficult to write the executive summary if you haven't written the plan. So what do you start with? Company information. Describe your company. What is your company doing? As I mentioned in Module 1, you do not have a company unless it's solving a problem. So talk about the problem your company is solving here. Now these next 2 points, you don't need to spend a lot of time in them right now because we're going to discuss it in more detail later in your plan. But you want to write down what it is you're selling and who your target markets are. Let's talk about the product or service you're offering. What are the features? What does it do? Let's talk about the benefits. What problem does your product or service solve? What is the benefit? What is the value proposition? Are there any future products or services that you're considering offering? Talk about what you think those are going to be and the timeline that you're considering offering those and some rationale behind that. So this is a little bit about your product and service. The marketing plan. I've talked about the product, now let's talk about the marketing plan that goes with that. First of all, what industry are you in? Let's talk about your industry. How big is it? Are you in a large industry? Or are you in a niche industry where you're going to be a major player? Is your industry that you're in growing or is it experiencing problems? If it's growing, that's great. If it's experiencing problems, you need to spend time explaining how you are going to do better than the other companies in your industry group. What's going to set you apart? As a boating client of mine once said, it's real easy to sail with the wind. It is tough to sail into the wind. So if you can take the momentum of your industry to help you succeed, that's great. Your target market. Let's talk about the target market that you are now going to go after. 2 major types. You've got the individual consumer and you've got companies. Let's take the individual consumer first. Individual consumer target market is described typically in 2 different ways, demographically and psychographically. Demographic characteristics are characteristics like age, gender, income, education. Psychographic characteristics are describing someone's lifestyle, their opinions, their attitudes, their beliefs. Words used are like web savvy, early adopters, couch potatoes. Different way of describing your customer. Now let's look at the company profile. Yes?
Question. I live in a small town, and there is no place for people to go who want to exercise on a regular basis. And I'm thinking about starting a gym there. So do I look at the demographics and the psychographics characteristics in planning and looking at my target market profile?
Yes, you're exactly right. You need to look at both. Don't focus just on one. I'll give you a prime example. With your gym, I assume there's probably an income level and an age range that you're targeting. Because, for example, they've got to be able to afford your gym. Well, if you're just looking at those 2 characteristics, what happens if someone who meets those 2 criteria is a couch potato? They're not going to come to your gym. So you've got to look at it both ways. That's a very good question.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about the company side. If you're selling to a company, talk about the industry you're selling into, the size of these companies, the location, any other information that will give a good picture of those kind of companies. Do not forget, and this happens quite a bit, is to determine who you're going to sell to in the company. Is it the president? Is it the marketing manager? Warehouse manager? Who is the decision maker? This is very important because if you're not able to identify the decision maker in the company, it's going to be very difficult to sell. So don't forget that. Is your target market growing? Or is it experiencing problems? As I mentioned earlier, it's a lot easier to sell in an industry or a target market in this case that's doing well. If there are problems in your target market, you need to explain how you're going to handle that. How are you going to deal with the problems you're seeing in your target market? Any unique trends going on in your target market? Again, this is important because this will give an indication of where you can take your company over time. Is there anything there you need to be watching out for as you grow and develop your company? Now, if you have a great product and service, of course you do, I'm sure, and you've identified a great target market, which I'm sure you have, there must be competition. Well, you would be surprised at the number of people who say, oh, I don't have any competition. There's no competition in what I'm doing. Wrong. Except for rare cases, you always have competition. Competition pops up in two ways. One, you have direct competition. Now let's take your example with the gym. Direct competition in your example would be if another gym similar to yours opens up down the street. Direct competition. Indirect competition are competitors who offer an alternative solution to the problem you're trying to solve. Again, with your example, that would be a sporting goods store that sells gym equipment for your home. So instead of going to your gym to exercise, they can exercise at home on a regular basis. Another alternative solution could be someone who runs on a daily basis. They're getting exercise, but again, they don't need your gym in order to do that. Make sense? So don't think you do not have any competition. You do. Once you've identified your competition, both direct and indirect, list the strengths and weaknesses. After you've listed the strengths and weaknesses, also rank those strengths and weaknesses in order of importance. With that information, now start discussing your competitive advantage. How are you going to compete based on those strengths and weaknesses? Don't just focus on the weaknesses. Also look at the strengths. For example, if you find that your competition is known for high quality customer service, what are you going to do to compete against that? That's a strength you need to pay attention to. Competition is something you really need to spend a lot of time on. You really do. If you do not spend time analyzing your competition, you are going to be at a major disadvantage when you're dealing with prospects and existing customers. Because I can promise you, your prospects and existing customers know exactly what the competition is doing, and they are shopping you. So do not gloss over this. Now, with all this information, let's talk about the marketing plan as it relates to the strategies we're going to use. What are the pricing strategies that are going to come out of all this research that you've done? The packaging. How are you going to package your product or service to make it stand out, to be competitive? The promotion. Is it newspaper, web-based, television, direct mail, combination thereof? What's the best way to promote your product? Sales. Got Salesforce are you going to have? And distribution. How are you going to get your product or service to the consumer, to the end user? All of the answers to these issues are based on the research that you've done and what you've said so far in your business plan. Now, we need to have people who can execute all this. So who are we going to have in our business? For the management team, write out the job descriptions. This is very important now, and of course, as you start looking for these folks, you can tell them what you're expecting them to do. Team member backgrounds. Include the resumes of the folks that you have in your management team. Now, go ahead and continue developing your organizational chart. Write the other job descriptions for your staff, as well as a number of people needed and when they're needed. Yes?
I'm in the process of starting a business and will not have all my positions filled when I write the business plan. Is that going to be a problem as I try to get financing for my business?
Good question. I guess it is sort of hard to offer someone a job for a company that doesn't exist. So that's a common issue. It is not a problem, funding sources know this, as long as the people you want to hire are readily available in the job market. If you need to hire people that have very specialized backgrounds, and there may be only one or two in the world, it could be a problem. But for most small businesses, that's not an issue. So don't worry about that at all. Along that subject, a lot of people will list the salaries of the individual employees. Some will group those salaries together in one large number. It really depends on who your audience is for this business plan, on which way you want to go about doing it. Now you've got the people, where are they going to work? Let's talk about your location. The amount of time you spend in this section really depends on how important your location is, your facilities, to the success of your business. So in describing your location, it can be an address, it can be a neighborhood, area of town, a county, whatever description you think is most needed for your situation. You also want to talk about any unique characteristics. Yes?
Yeah, I'm planning to start a business, but I don't have a location picked out yet. I'm kind of hesitant to sign a lease until I know I'm going to get the money I need. Is that going to be a problem for the bank?
I understand exactly what you're saying, and you're exactly right, because you do not want to sign the lease on a building before you've gotten the funding needed to get the business up and running. Otherwise, if you don't get the funding, you're stuck with the building lease. Not a good thing. So what you want to do is first identify as best you can the location, the type of business you need. From that, find out what the rent would be and the cost to upfit that building to meet your needs. Take those numbers and put them into your projections. Then, when it's time to lease the space, you've accounted for those costs. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Great, great. If there are any special permits, licenses, feel free to list those also. Financial plan. Okay, up until this point, we've been talking about the text portion of your business plan. Now let's talk about the numerical description of your business plan as it is shown through the financial statements. When you're developing your financial statements, use some type of spreadsheet software because you're going to be doing a lot of if-then, what-if kind of modeling, and you're going to be making a lot of changes, and so make sure that you have some software that you can do that with. Document your assumptions because people are going to ask, how did you come up with this figure of $1.5 million a year in sales? Document it. Make sure the financial statements support each other, as well as the text portion of your business plan. You would hate for one financial statement to say, I'm going to do 1.5 million in sales, and then another financial statement say, I'm going to do 1 million in sales for the first year. Make sure they all match. Now let's talk about the three financial statements most seen in a business plan. Cash flow projections, the main one. Now with these statements, I'm going to show you examples in a few minutes, and we're just going to go over them just quickly right here. Typically, cash flow projections are written out on a monthly basis for at least 3 years. Projected income statements are generated on a quarterly basis for typically 3 years, and projected balance sheets yearly for around 3 years. Of those three statements, cash flows are always seen. Projected income statement and balance sheets, they're in there quite a bit, but it really depends on your situation. But I would say, if you had to pick, it's the cash flow projections that you need. The numbers in the cash flow projections are used in generating the income statement and the balance sheet. It's got to be there. Here's a sample of a cash flow projection. You notice there's a column there for startup period, and then I've got months 1, 2, 3, and it goes out there. Think of a cash flow statement as you would your checkbook register. You enter deposits when they occur. So when you make deposits into the bank, you enter that into your checkbook register. When you write checks, go to the ATM, or withdraw money, you record that in your checkbook register. That is the way the cash flow projections work. The top part of the projections are where you put in the money coming into the business. The bottom part are your expenses going out. You take the money in the business, subtract the money going out, and at the bottom you have your ending cash balance. The cash balance at the end of the first month then becomes the beginning cash balance for the beginning of the next month. And it's a cycle. And you continue it. Cash balance at the end of that month becomes the beginning cash balance of the next month. And it just keeps going that direction. A lot of people will try to get the ending cash balance each month to go to zero. That's not the goal here. The goal here is to make sure you have enough money to run your business. Let's say you plan to hire an additional employee in 3 months. Okay? You need to make sure in month 1 and 2 that you're accumulating enough money to be able to pay the salary for that new employee on month 3. So if you zero out your cash flow balance in month 1 or 2, then you're not going to have enough money saved up to pay that employee. So the cash flow balance each month is dependent upon those needs that you're going to experience over time. And of course, as I mentioned at the very beginning, none of us are mind readers, so it's very difficult to determine exactly what our cash flow is going to be. So make sure you allow for error. As I always say, things cost a lot more than you expect. From the cash flow statement, you can write the income statement. Again, this is typically done on a quarterly basis. The income statement is showing the sales and the cost needed to generate those sales. And you're showing this on a 3-year period on a quarterly basis. Then lastly, we've got the balance sheet. The balance sheet lists your assets, your liabilities, and owner's equity. The reason they call it a balance sheet is because the total assets equal the total liabilities plus owner's equity. They must balance. That is an overview of the business plan. Where do we go from here? A couple of things. First of all, refer to the Start section of our website to be able to take advantage of all the products and services that we offer. If you would like to talk to one of our SBTDC counselors, you can go to the website and find the location closest to you. Lastly, in a few days, we're going to send you an email survey. I hope you'll please fill it out because we use your information to build on our online program. Thank you very much and best of luck in your new business venture.